Zyra had always believed she understood everything about the human race. She had studied them from afar, read their histories, and even watched their strange emotional displays through the interstellar networks. To her people, the Lithari, humans were fascinating but fragile creatures. They lived fast, loved deeply, and died quickly. To Zyra, that made them curious, not admirable. The Lithari didn't feel pain the way humans did. They could be injured and heal without tears, without fear. Pain was an old, primitive thing her kind had evolved beyond. So when Zyra was chosen to represent the Lithari embassy on Earth, she accepted the mission with pride. She thought of herself as strong, calm, above emotion. The thought of spending time among humans almost felt like a test, one she would easily pass. Her first night on Earth began quietly. The sky outside her window glowed with orange city lights, and rain tapped gently on the glass. Zyra's human host, a young man named Jonah, greeted her with a polite smile. His home was small, warm, and cluttered with the strange objects humans love to collect: books, photographs, soft fabrics. "You can take my bed," Jonah said kindly. "It's more comfortable." "I'll sleep on the couch," Zyra blinked in surprise. "That is unnecessary. We can share it. My species does not require much space." Jonah hesitated, clearly unsure how to respond. Sure," he said finally, scratching the back of his neck. "If you're fine with that." Zyra nodded, her face calm, though inside she felt a flicker of unease. Sharing a sleeping surface with a human was not something she had expected, but it was logical. She told herself it was merely a cultural difference, nothing more. The bed was soft, far softer than the resting platforms on her homeworld. The warmth of the blankets felt strange against her cool skin. Jonah lay a careful distance away, trying not to make her uncomfortable. The sound of his slow breathing filled the quiet room. Zyra stared at the ceiling, her silver eyes reflecting the dim light. Humans slept to recover strength. The Lithari entered trance states, calm, deep stillness of the mind. But when she tried to focus, she found her thoughts disturbed. She could feel Jonah's presence beside her, his heartbeat faint but steady, his warmth spreading across the bed. It was distracting. It was strange, and it made her chest feel tight in a way she didn't understand. After a while, Jonah shifted slightly. His arm brushed hers. It was a simple, innocent touch, but Zyra's entire body stiffened. A spark of heat shot through her skin, and her nerves reacted sharply as if stung. She gasped softly. Jonah stirred, half awake. "You okay?" he murmured. Zyra hesitated. "Yes, I am fine." He nodded sleepily and drifted off again, unaware of what had just happened. Zyra lay still, trying to make sense of the strange sensation. It was not just heat, it was something deeper, sharper. Her mind searched for the word, and then she realized it. Pain. She frowned. That was impossible. Her body had never reacted like this before. Lithari physiology was advanced. They could not experience pain in the same primitive way humans did. Yet the feeling lingered, soft but persistent, spreading like a slow burn beneath her skin. For the first time in her long life, Zyra was afraid of what she was feeling. It was as though her body had learned something new, something forbidden. Outside, thunder rumbled gently across the city. The light from the window flickered on Jonah's face, peaceful and unaware. Zyra watched him, wondering how a species so fragile could endure something so powerful every day. And as the night went on, Zyra realized a quiet truth. Pain was not weakness. It was connection. It was life pressing itself into the body, reminding it that it existed. When morning came, she did not sleep. She simply lay there, listening to Jonah's breathing, feeling the strange ache that would not fade. For the first time, Zyra understood that she was not as unbreakable as she believed, and that realization frightened her and fascinated her, because beneath that fear, something new was beginning to bloom, something human. The morning light spilled softly through the thin curtains, warming the small room. Zyra sat on the edge of the bed, her silver eyes staring at her hands as if they were no longer her own. The strange ache from last night had not disappeared. It pulsed faintly under her skin like a whisper she could not silence. Jonah walked in, his hair messy, his eyes half open from sleep. He smiled in that easy human way. "Morning, Zyra, did you sleep okay?" She looked at him, unsure how to answer. "I rested," she said carefully. Her voice was calm, but her thoughts were storming inside. She didn't want to admit that she had felt pain, that something in her had changed because of a single touch. Jonah nodded and went about making breakfast. The smell of toasted bread filled the air, strange and heavy. Zira's senses were sharper than usual. Her skin almost sensitive to everything, the warmth of the room, the faint hum of the refrigerator, even the steady rhythm of Jonah's heart. She found herself watching him more closely than she intended. Humans were so full of life, always moving, always feeling. Their emotions were written on their faces, in their gestures, in the small sighs they made when they thought no one noticed. Zira envied that simplicity. The Lethari did not show emotion so freely. They were taught to suppress, to remain still, to never let their hearts speak louder than their minds. Jonah noticed her gaze and chuckled softly. "You look like you're studying me again." Zira blinked, embarrassed. "I was thinking," she admitted. "You seem very alive." He laughed, a warm, unguarded sound that made her chest tighten again. "That's one way to put it. You make it sound like you're not." She hesitated, unsure how to answer. "We live long lives," she said quietly. "But maybe we do not live as deeply." Jonah looked at her curiously but said nothing more. Later that night, the ache returned. The rain had come again, soft and rhythmic, like a lullaby. Jonah turned off the lights and lay beside her once more. Zira told herself she would stay still, that she wouldn't react to his movements this time. But when he shifted in his sleep, his hand brushed against hers again and a wave of pain, sharp yet strangely warm, spread through her arm. She flinched and bit her lip, refusing to make a sound. The sensation was unbearable, but it was also beautiful. It was real, something she had never experienced before. Her heart began to beat faster. She could feel it racing inside her chest, echoing in her throat. Jonah stirred beside her, his sleepy voice soft and concerned. "You okay?" "I am fine," she whispered, though she wasn't. She didn't understand what was happening to her. Every small touch, every breath of warmth against her skin felt like fire and lightning. It hurt, yet she couldn't bring herself to pull away. Zira turned to face him in the dim light. Jonah's face was peaceful, the kind of peace her people spent decades meditating to find. There was a small scar on his cheek, a mark of pain from some old wound. He carried it easily, like all humans did, with quiet strength. She reached out, unable to stop herself, and traced the scar with a trembling fingertip. Jonah's skin was warm, and the contact sent another wave of that same burning pain through her hand. But this time she didn't recoil. She wanted to understand it. Pain wasn't just something that hurt, it was something that connected. As she lay there, Zira realized how different this world truly was. Humans didn't avoid pain, they embraced it. They built songs, stories, and love around it. It was part of who they were. And now, through this strange bond with Jonah, it was becoming part of her too. Tears filled her eyes, though she didn't understand why. Lethari didn't cry. They weren't supposed to, but the tears came anyway, silent and warm against her cold skin. Jonah, half asleep, shifted closer without realizing it. His arm rested gently against hers, and though the contact sent another pulse of ache through her body, she didn't move. She stayed there, letting it hurt, letting it heal something deeper inside her that she hadn't even known was broken. For the first time, Zira understood that the human heart was not weak because it felt pain. It was strong because it did. And as she closed her eyes, feeling the steady rhythm of Jonah's breathing beside her, she began to wonder if this was what it truly meant to live. The next few days passed quietly, but something inside Zira had changed. She could feel it every time she looked at Jonah. The sharp ache that had first frightened her now lingered like a memory she couldn't forget. It wasn't just physical pain anymore. It was something deeper, emotional, almost human. Jonah had no idea what was happening to her. He treated her kindly, spoke to her like a friend, and smiled in that easy way that made her chest tighten. Every time he laughed, she felt warmth spread through her body. Every time he frowned, she felt an ache in her heart, as if his sadness became her own. She tried to distract herself with work. Her mission was important, to observe, to learn, to report how humans lived. But the more she studied them, the more she realized that no data or report could ever capture what it meant to be human. That night, when the rain returned again, Jonah and Zira prepared to sleep. The room was dim, the air cool and calm. Zaira hesitated before lying down beside him. She could already feel the strange anticipation in her chest, the mix of fear and longing she still didn't understand. Jonah noticed her hesitation. "You don't have to, you know," he said softly. "If it makes you uncomfortable, I can take the floor." Zaira looked at him, her silver eyes uncertain. "No," she said after a moment. "I want to stay. It helps me understand." Jonah smiled gently. "Understand what?" She hesitated. "You," she whispered. "Your kind. How you feel, how you endure." He chuckled softly, not realizing how serious her words were. "We're not that complicated, Zaira. We just feel a lot, I guess. It's what makes us human." Zaira nodded, though she wasn't sure she agreed. Humans were very complicated. They were fragile and powerful at the same time, filled with endless contradictions. They could love and hate, laugh and cry, break and heal, all within the same heart. It fascinated her. It scared her. When Jonah fell asleep beside her, Zaira found herself listening to his breathing again. Slow, steady human. She tried not to think about the pain, but when he moved closer in his sleep, his arm brushing her side, the familiar sting returned. She gasped softly, but didn't move away. Her hand trembled as she placed it over his. The warmth of his skin seeped through her fingers, sending tiny shocks through her nerves. It hurt, but it also made her feel alive. Her kind had never known this closeness, this gentle suffering that made everything real. Lithari relationships were calm and distant, logical and unshaken. They shared minds but never hearts. Yet here she was, trembling at the touch of a fragile human who didn't even know what he was teaching her. Zaira's thoughts wandered. She remembered her homeworld, its cold beauty, its silent halls, the faces of her people who never smiled too wide or spoke too loud. They believed peace came from control, from never letting emotion rule them. But lying here beside Jonah, Zaira began to wonder if peace was really worth that emptiness. When Jonah turned in his sleep, his arm slid across her waist. She froze, her body reacting instantly. The pain was sharp but familiar now, almost comforting. Her throat tightened, her eyes stung again, and before she could stop herself, a tear rolled down her cheek. She didn't understand why she was crying. She wasn't sad. She wasn't hurt. She just felt overwhelmed. Jonah stirred slightly, his voice soft with sleep. "Zaira?" She swallowed hard. "I am fine," she whispered. "Go back to sleep." He mumbled something unintelligible and drifted off again, his hand still resting lightly against her. Zaira lay awake for a long time, feeling every heartbeat, every breath, every spark of pain and warmth between them. She realized she had crossed a line she could never return from. She was no longer just observing humanity. She was becoming part of it. And though it scared her, part of her didn't want it to stop. Because for the first time in her long life, Zaira felt connected to another being, not through duty, not through logic, but through something raw and real. She finally closed her eyes, whispering to herself in the dark, "So this is what it means to feel." The ache in her chest deepened, but she didn't push it away. She embraced it, letting it become part of her. Because somewhere between the pain and the warmth, between the fear and the closeness, Zaira had found something she never expected to discover on Earth. Something stronger than pride, stronger than her species' perfection. She had found the beginning of a human heart beating inside her. Zaira woke before dawn, her heart heavy and restless. The quiet hum of the city outside felt distant, almost unreal. For the past few nights, she had been living two lives, one as a Lithari observer, calm and disciplined, and another as a woman who had started to feel too much. Her mission reports to her superiors were becoming shorter. She no longer wrote about human politics or technology. Instead, she found herself describing emotions, laughter, sorrow, and the strange comfort that came from touch. She didn't know why, but she wanted her people to understand what humans carried inside them. But deep down, Zaira knew she was changing, and change was dangerous. The Lithari Council valued control above everything. To them, emotion was weakness. If they learned she was feeling pain, real human pain, they might recall her, maybe even erase her memories. Jonah was still asleep beside her, his face calm, his breathing soft. She watched him, wondering how a being so fragile could live with so much courage. Humans were short-lived, yet they loved without fear. They suffered, but still they smiled. Zyra couldn't understand how they endured such constant pain and kept moving forward. When the morning light reached the bed, Jonah stirred and opened his eyes. "You're awake early," he said with a sleepy smile. "I could not rest," Zyra admitted. "Nightmares?" he asked gently. She hesitated. "Not nightmares, just thoughts." Jonah sat up, rubbing his eyes. "You think too much," he said kindly. "Sometimes you just need to feel." The words hit her harder than he knew. She looked away, hiding the turmoil in her chest. That was exactly what she was afraid of, feeling too much. As the day went on, Zyra tried to keep her distance. She spoke less, avoided eye contact, and focused on her reports. Jonah noticed the change but didn't push her. He gave her space, though his eyes often lingered on her with quiet concern. That night, the air between them felt different. Tense, heavy, uncertain. When they lay down again, there was more distance than before. Zyra turned her back to him, clutching the blanket tightly. She told herself it was better this way. She had to remember who she was, a representative, not a human woman caught in strange emotions. But the silence hurt. It pressed on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Then Jonah's quiet voice broke through the dark. "Did I do something wrong?" Her throat tightened. "No," she whispered. "You did nothing wrong." "Then why does it feel like you're a million miles away?" Zyra closed her eyes. "Because I am afraid," she said softly. He moved closer, his warmth brushing against her back. "Afraid of what?" She hesitated, her voice trembling. "Afraid of feeling what I'm not supposed to feel. My people do not live like you. We do not hurt like you. But ever since I came here, She stopped herself before finishing. Jonah waited, patient and kind. "Ever since you what?" Zyra turned slightly, her silver eyes shimmering in the dim light. "Ever since I shared this bed with you, I have felt pain. Real pain, and yet I do not want it to stop." Jonah's face softened. He reached out and gently took her hand. The contact made her flinch again, the familiar burn spreading through her skin. But this time, she didn't pull away. "You think pain is something bad?" Jonah said quietly. "But it's not always. Sometimes it's how we know we care." Zyra stared at him, her heart beating faster. His words echoed in her mind, sinking deep into her chest. When he finally fell asleep, Zyra stayed awake, lost in thought. She realized that the real conflict wasn't between her and Jonah. It was inside her, between the part of her that wanted to stay strong and distant, and the part that longed to feel everything, no matter how much it hurt. As the night went on, she understood that no species, no training, no logic could protect her from what was happening. She had touched the heart of humanity, and now it was burning inside her like a flame she could never extinguish. Zyra turned toward Jonah, her eyes wet but calm. For the first time, she didn't fight the feeling. She let the ache settle deep within her, knowing that pain wasn't her enemy. It was her proof of being alive. And as she closed her eyes beside the sleeping human, she whispered softly into the dark, "Maybe this is what it means to have a soul." The next morning, the world outside was gray and silent. A thin fog had covered the city, and the sound of distant traffic echoed softly through the window. Zyra stood by the glass, watching the faint outlines of buildings fade into the mist. Her reflection looked strange to her now, too human, too uncertain. Jonah entered the room quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You like it sweet, right?" he asked with a small smile. She turned to him, blinking. "I do not need nourishment from this," she said, though her voice was softer than before. "I know," he replied, handing her the cup anyway. "But it's not about need. It's about comfort." Zyra hesitated, then took the cup. The warmth seeped through her hands, and somehow it calmed her. She didn't understand why something so small could make her heart feel lighter. They sat together in silence for a while. Jonah sipped his drink, occasionally glancing at her. Zyra could sense his curiosity, his unspoken questions. Finally, he broke the silence. "You've been quiet lately," he said gently. "You used to ask 100 questions a day. Now you just watch." Zyra looked down at the cup in her hands. "Because I do not know what to ask anymore," she said quietly. "I used to think I understood what it means to live, but now, everything feels different." Jonah leaned forward slightly. "Different how?" She looked at him with those pale, shimmering eyes. "Before, life was only existence. Breathing, working, learning, surviving. but now it feels heavier and yet more beautiful. Every small thing hurts and heals at the same time. Every heartbeat feels like a storm inside me. Jonah smiled faintly. That sounds a lot like being human. Zira let out a shaky laugh. Then maybe I am learning too fast. That night the fog grew thicker. Power flickered across the neighborhood and the air turned cold. Jonah gave Zira the extra blanket, but she refused. You need it more than I do, she insisted. He shook his head. We both need to stay warm. Come here. Before she could argue, he gently pulled her closer under the same blanket. The closeness made her chest tighten again. She could feel his warmth, his heartbeat against her arm. The familiar sting of pain returned, but it no longer scared her. It was softer now, like the echo of an old wound healing slowly. Jonah noticed her trembling and looked at her with concern. You okay? Yes, she whispered. It still hurts, but I think I want it to. Jonah frowned slightly. You want to hurry? She nodded. Because when it hurts, I know I am alive. I know I am here beside you. It reminds me that I am not made of stone. Jonah was quiet for a long time. Then, with a kind smile, he said, Zira, maybe pain isn't meant to be escaped. Maybe it's what makes us real. The word struck her deeply. No one in her world would ever say such a thing. Pain was something her people had erased, something to be feared and forgotten. But here was a human, fragile and mortal, speaking of pain like it was a friend. Zira's throat tightened. You're kind. You feel so much, yet you keep moving forward. You love even when you know it will hurt. You lose and still you hope. How do you do that? Jonah's gaze softened. Because if we stop feeling, we stop being human. Pain and love, they're not opposites. They live together. You can't have one without the other. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Zira felt the truth of his words sink into her like light breaking through fog. She reached out, hesitantly placing her hand over his. When I first came here, I thought I was stronger than you. But now I know. You are the strong ones. You carry pain every day and still smile. Jonah squeezed her hand gently. And that single gesture sent a wave of warmth through her. As the night grew colder, they stayed like that, two beings from different worlds, bound by the same fragile thing that made life worth living. Zira closed her eyes and whispered almost to herself, If pain is part of love, then I will not fear it anymore. Jonah smiled softly, his thumb brushing against her hand. Welcome to being human. For the first time, Zira didn't feel like an outsider. She felt alive. She felt human. And deep inside her chest, the ache that once terrified her now pulsed with quiet, beautiful strength. The days that followed felt softer somehow, as if the world itself had slowed down for Zira. She began to notice things she had ignored before. The smell of rain after a storm, the hum of city lights at night, the way Jonah hummed quietly when he cooked. These small human details, once meaningless to her, now felt precious. They were fragile, fleeting moments, but they carried life within them. Jonah could see the change in her. She laughed more now, even if it was quiet and unsure. Her eyes no longer looked distant. When she spoke, there was warmth in her voice, not just logic. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jonah found Zira sitting on the balcony, staring at the sky. The first stars were appearing, their faint glow scattered across the clouds. She looked peaceful, but there was something in her expression that he couldn't read. He walked over and leaned against the railing beside her. You've been quiet again, he said softly. What's on your mind? Zira turned to him, her silver eyes reflecting the evening light. Do you ever wonder, she began, why humans were made to feel so much pain? Jonah smiled gently. All the time, he admitted. But I think maybe pain teaches us what really matters. You can't value warmth unless you've known the cold. You can't truly love if you've never felt loss. Zira listened, her gaze thoughtful. On my world, we erased pain. We thought it made us perfect. But now I see. Maybe we only made ourselves hollow. Jonah looked at her for a moment, then said softly, Maybe that's why you were sent here, to remember what it means to be alive. His words hit something deep inside her. She had come to Earth believing she was here to study humans, to analyze their strange emotional ways. But now she wondered if it was something more. If fate, or whatever the universe was, had brought her here to feel. As the wind brushed past them, Zira suddenly felt a familiar ache in her chest. Not physical pain this time, but something emotional, It was heavy and tender all at once. She realized it wasn't just humanity she was beginning to understand. It was Jonah. She turned her head slightly, studying him as he looked out over the city. His face was gentle, lined with quiet strength. He was ordinary by human standards, but to her he was extraordinary. He had given her something her people had never known. Connection. "Jonah," she said softly. He glanced at her. "Yeah, I think I'm afraid again." He frowned slightly. "Afraid of what?" Her voice trembled. "Of losing this. Of losing you." Jonah looked surprised, then smiled a bit sadly. "Zyra, you won't lose me. I'm right here." She shook her head slowly. "You don't understand. My kind lives for centuries. Humans live much shorter lives. Someday you will fade, and I will still be here, still remembering. That thought hurts more than anything I've felt." Jonah was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Maybe that's okay. Maybe it's supposed to hurt. It means what we have is real." Tears filled Zyra's eyes again. She didn't know how to stop them anymore, and she didn't want to. "You speak of pain as if it is something to cherish." He smiled faintly. "Maybe it is. Because pain reminds us that love was real." Zyra felt something shift inside her, something deep and irreversible. All the lessons, all the logic of her people faded away. What mattered now wasn't the absence of pain. It was the meaning behind it. She reached out and touched Jonah's cheek. Her fingers trembled, but she didn't pull away. "You've shown me what no one in my world ever could," she whispered. "You've shown me that to feel pain is to be alive, and to love is to accept that pain." Jonah placed his hand over hers and said softly, "Then maybe you're more human than you think." For a long moment, they just sat there under the darkening sky, two souls from different worlds bound by the same fragile truth. Zyra finally understood. Pain wasn't something to escape. It was the bridge that connected hearts. And though it scared her, she would rather walk that bridge 1,000 times than live another century without feeling. As night fell, she whispered more to herself than to Jonah, "Now I know why you humans endure so much. It's not weakness. It's love." Jonah smiled and looked at her with quiet pride. "Exactly," he said. "It's always been love." Zyra closed her eyes, letting the ache in her heart settle peacefully. For the first time, it didn't hurt. It belonged. The days after that night felt different for Zyra. She woke each morning to the sound of human life outside, the laughter of neighbors, the cry of a baby, the rhythm of footsteps on the street. Every sound carried emotion. Every face told a story. She had studied these things before, but now, they touched her heart in ways she couldn't explain. Jonah noticed the change too. She smiled more easily now, even at small things. Sometimes she would stop to watch sunlight fall through the curtains and whisper softly, "It's beautiful." She no longer spoke like a visitor on Earth. She spoke like someone who belonged. One evening, a storm rolled across the city. The rain came hard against the windows and thunder echoed like a heartbeat through the sky. Jonah had caught a fever that day. His skin was hot, his voice weak, but he still smiled when Zyra brought him water. "Humans are so fragile," she said softly, placing a damp cloth on his forehead. Jonah chuckled weakly. "Yeah, but we're stubborn too. Don't count us out yet." Zyra tried to smile, but worry filled her chest. His breathing was slower, and for the first time she realized how truly short human life could be. A wave of fear passed through her. The kind of fear that didn't come from danger, but from the thought of losing someone. She sat by his side all night, holding his hand, watching over him. The storm raged outside, lightning flashing across the dark sky. Jonah's hand twitched in hers and she tightened her grip. At one point he opened his eyes and whispered, "Zyra, you're still here?" "Always," she said softly. He smiled faintly, his eyes half closed. "You know, I used to think pain was just something bad that we had to survive, but now, I think it's proof that we cared enough to hurt." Zyra's throat tightened. "You humans, you feel everything so deeply, even when it hurts. That's what makes life worth living," Jonah murmured. "Don't ever forget that." His words cut into her heart like light through glass. She wanted to tell him everything she felt, how he had changed her, how she would carry his memory forever. But her voice trembled too much to speak. She stayed awake until dawn, her hand never leaving his. When the sun finally rose, Jonah was still. His breathing was faint but steady. Relief flooded her chest when he opened his eyes again and whispered, You stayed. I told you, she said softly, tears in her eyes. I will not leave. Over the next few days, Jonah slowly recovered. Zyra took care of him with gentle hands, learning how fragile yet strong humans could be. Every smile he gave her felt like a small miracle. But deep inside, Zyra knew something had changed. She could feel pain now, not the kind that came from a wound or a cut, but the kind that came from love. It lived inside her chest, both beautiful and heavy. One night, when Jonah had fallen asleep again, Zyra stepped out onto the balcony. The stars stretched wide above her, endless and silent. Her people were somewhere out there, still living in cold perfection, untouched by emotion. She placed a hand over her heart. You were wrong, she whispered to the stars. Pain is not our weakness. It is our proof that we live. Her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of gratitude. Pain, she realized, was not something to fear. It was a part of the gift Jonah had given her. She turned back toward him, sleeping peacefully, and smiled softly. You taught me what it means to be alive, she whispered. You showed me that love and pain walk hand in hand, and I would choose this. Every time. As dawn light spread across the horizon, Zyra sat beside Jonah and watched the first rays touch his face. She felt the ache of love and the quiet burn of fear, but she didn't run from it. For the first